Today's guest is Jessa Zimmerman. She is a certified sex therapist, and she shares her story, her journey to becoming a sex therapist late in life. And I love her story because, like so many of my other guests, it's her past, her failures, her lessons that led her to where she is today. And she is now teaching the tools that she lacked, and her first marriage failed. So, and she kind of picked herself up from her bootstraps when she divorced because she didn't have a skill set that she could lean on after being a stay-at-home mom. So this is her story, and we get into some sex talk, which you might enjoy or you might not. You'll learn some things about me that you might be going, please no, do not share. I overshare in this episode maybe, but there might be somebody out there who is in the same boat as I am as a 61-year-old. And I got some tips, and I'm certainly thankful that Jessa came onto my show and shared these things because they helped me and they might just help you. So let's get right to the episode now. Welcome to another episode of Not Your Average Lives. And today I have with me Jessa Zimmerman. And I think my audience will find this topic interesting because I have had a sexpert on before, and Jessa is a certified sex therapist. So it should be a juicy episode. I know the last time I talked about it, I got really uncomfortable. So I'm sure Jessa will walk us through this in the best way possible, but I'll get open about, some of what's going on with me at 61. So welcome to the program, Jessa. And I know that we're going to talk a little bit about how you got to where you are today, because I don't think you started out as that. So Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you. So Jessa Zimmerman. I'm a certified sex therapist, which is actually important to distinguish between people that are certified in this work and people that aren't. And I work in private practice in Seattle, 100% with couples and 99% around sexual concerns. Not that you can take sex out of the rest of the relationship, right? Like, it's couples counseling too. And then I'm also the founder of the Intimacy with Ease method, because over the years of working with couples, I was seeing the same themes and developed this sort of process for people. So I wrote a book a few years ago that has become this method. So I'm trying to get this work out to more people that, then can come to my office. So.
Yeah. How is COVID affecting your practice?
Well, I'm working 100% remote. So I'm in Seattle, so in Washington State, Governor Inslee was one of the first ones to issue a stay-at-home order. So I moved home, have done everything through Zoom, and I'm still doing that because I cannot imagine doing therapy wearing a mask. Not being able to read each other, and the couple, like facial expressions are so crucial. So while I don't think Zoom is perfect, or online, it's better than that. So I imagine I'll be doing this for the foreseeable future. And I'm as busy as ever, because part of what's happening with COVID is couples are, they're at home 24/7, and it's bringing things up. It's either time now to work on some things, or things are sort of coming to a head. Mm-hmm. So I've been busy.
Yeah. I have a question. And this just comes up because I'm on my second marriage, and my first husband and I did go to marriage therapy, marriage counseling on a couple of occasions. And throughout our marriage, we were married 25 years. So it was 6 years and 16 years.
Yeah.
Then when it ended, I was like, no more of that. But I was just wondering, because I was the one who initiated the counseling both times. And I'm just curious, is it usually the woman who initiates it, or does the man also?
No. Well, I mean, first of all, there's, couples that aren't heterosexual too, but no, it could be anybody. I mean, it's just as common for men to want to be the ones coming into therapy. I think there are, in every relationship, there's somebody who's a higher desire partner, not just for sex, but for addressing things.
Right.
There's more urgency or concern, or we've got to do something about this. And then there's a lower desire partner for whatever it is. So that higher desire partner for change is going to be the one that contacts me, but it's not always the woman.
Yeah, that's interesting, because you're right. It's like my ex-husband, and he's a wonderful guy, but he would be the rug sweep her under.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm like,
And it's
I'm not going to live like this kind of thing.
right. And what happens, for a lot, I mean, occasionally people come into therapy like preventatively. We just want to make sure we're doing great, those, but for most people, it's gotten to a place where it's like, we can't do this anymore. Something needs to change. And one of the things I say about therapy a lot, I mean, I wish people would go sooner, because the sooner you go, the sooner you can fix things. And occasionally it goes so long, like it did in my first marriage, it's too late. Somebody's out, right? Like it's just too deep a hole to dig out of. And so it's always sad to me when people put off therapy and go as a very, very last resort. And it's like, oh man, you might have been able to do something about this if you'd done it earlier.
Yeah, our first therapist at the 6-year mark said that typically by the time the husband agrees, that it's too late to salvage it. The woman's already way too past there, because I had asked him and he, no. And then finally, I was like, I want a divorce. And then he was like, okay, I'll go to counseling. So yeah, that's an interesting point.
Right. And again, whether it's man or woman or whatever gender, by the time when the second person agrees, sometimes that's too late because they're only coming in when the person says I want a divorce. But other times it's like, you're right, we can't keep doing this, or the person is being persistent enough that the second one says yes, but that's not always too late. But it can be.
I appreciate you pointing out that you do same sex, because I think about in my world, but yeah, of course there's same gender couples, so
right,
that help. That's great.
Right.
So how did you end up being a sex therapist? How did you, like, I always wonder, I'm very vanilla, and I mentioned this when I had the last guest on, and I was actually very uncomfortable. I think I'm pretty open, but then I realized I was like, well, maybe not.
Well,
it's fascinating, but yeah, I'm kind of like,
my brain goes so many different places. But one thing is, as part of becoming a certified sex therapist, we have to do 10 hours of something called sexuality attitude reassessment, where it's this intense, like lots of video and discussion and exposure to the breadth of sexuality, partly to find out where are our own edges, because we all have what we're comfortable with, and then there's a line, right? Anything over that line is kinky, anything on this side is okay. And as a sex therapist, it's incredibly important to be exposed to that whole variety and be comfortable with the whole thing. Not that we do it all ourselves. I'm also vanilla, but I can sit with people that practice a whole wide variety of things, and that's really, really important as a sex therapist.
Yeah.
But in terms of how I got started, it's like, where do I start in that story? Like, I was raised in a family that was very, very sex positive. My mom did sex education for this sort of private organization similar to Planned Parenthood, but this little, local thing. And she'd go into the schools and do sex ed. And my family was very open. And my parents were happily married for 52 years until my mom died. So I was raised in this very sex positive way.
Me too.
And then I got married, had all kinds of struggles. Struggles with sex in terms of.
And what was your sex experience before you got married?
I always loved sex, frankly.
You weren't a virgin when you got married.
No, I was not a virgin when I got married. No, I was not. I'd had long-term relationships. I'd had one-night stands. I just, I felt like I was having the sex I wanted largely. I can think back to a couple of events that were, I wouldn't quite say coerced or assault, but where I didn't quite know, I don't know how to get out of those. Or that's sort of a different story. But in general, had a very positive sexual life.
Yeah, I can't imagine being a virgin when you get married. That's all I want to say.
Yeah. There's definitely
in that, but
definitely challenges.
We don't want that. Although right. I 3 men. So I have my person I lost my virginity to, who was my boyfriend at the time. My current husband was the second, and the man I married for 25 years was my third. So then I remarried the second guy. So it's yeah. So very, very, not like crazy town type of implementation. So
so I'd had this history of feeling really good about sex and having good experiences, and it was nothing really but a positive thing in my life. And then I get married, and things were great at first, and I had my first child, and I had tearing with that birth.
Mm-hmm. I did too. My second. Yeah,
I had it with a second also. And sex hurt. after that, and it was devastating. I mean, it was the first time in my life where it's like I felt like I was broke. Something very fundamental about me didn't work anymore. And add on to that the struggles I had with my husband at the time around parenting and our relationship, it started getting really difficult. I sort
Yeah.
of think of it as having revealed the fault lines that were there.
Yeah.
Before kids, it was easy to sort of not sort of go that deep or run into those conflicts. But after children, we did. And then there were these sexual difficulties for me too.
Can I interject here?
Yeah.
So interesting how parallel our lives are. I had a tear, which I didn't know at the time, but not only a vaginal tear, but where your uterus attaches to your pelvis, there's ligaments, and I had pain, and so I would have pain during sex from that, and I went for a year to the doctor, and I even had somebody say, "Are you married?" Like insinuating that I had many partners, and just remember feeling so hurt. And I
Yeah.
finally found a doctor who realized, and I had surgery to fix it.
You know, the statistics are that women have more pain, and it's actually really common, and there are a lot of different causes. They generally have to go to 6 or 7 different medical providers to get an accurate diagnosis. And plenty of people are shaming or dismissive or just have a glass of wine or just relax or, and if it's hurting, there's something going on. And
Right.
it's really hard to have to, as a patient and as a woman who maybe feels broken or like what's going on or totally confused, to be the one that has to be that persistent about finding somebody to actually give you an answer and then figure out what the treatment is. I mean, it's really discouraging.
So how much do you think sex being a problem and the things that you're going through contributed to the problems in your marriage?
I think for me specifically, the relationship problems were bigger. Our ability at the time to really handle conflict and find common ground on some of this really came to a head around parenting. I think that was a bigger problem. And then the sexual difficulties complicated that. And then of course, I got into this whole thing that I see with my clients a lot, what I have come to call the sexual avoidance cycle, that when sex seems to go badly or there's pressure or stress or pain or bad feelings, whatever it is, of course we start to avoid it. But that only increases the pressure on sex, which makes it harder to have a good time. So I definitely got to the point in my marriage where I was avoiding sex, but not so much because of the pain, but because of the relationship dynamic. So I remember pretending to be asleep when he'd come in. And I mean, just that waking up at 4 a.m, at the pit of my stomach, like, oh, this is bad. Something's really wrong.
Mm.
And again, that wasn't so much about the pain I was having, more about the relationship itself.
Yeah. What happens when when with my first marriage, we just stopped having sex. We just it was like brother and sister. And
Yeah.
I don't even know why, because it wasn't like it was bad, but it was just like we just kind of started living those lives separately.
Yeah, right. And it's easy to do that. If sex wasn't bad or there were no reasons to be avoiding it specifically, I'd say you probably weren't invested. Yeah, I think of sex sort of, or even your relationship, it's like a garden, and you have to weed it, you have to pull stuff out, and you have to, put nutrients in. And if you're sort of not doing that work, it's easy to end up in 2 different places.
Yeah.
And for,
And
for
so
me,
you continued on your path, not being too happy in your marriage. And how long were you married?
I was married for 17 years, so had a 3rd child, and somehow the repair after that one, sex didn't hurt anymore. But pretty much for 7 years, it did, between the first and my 3rd. It got a little bit better at the end there, but it was, but then we were married for another, 4 or 5 years after my youngest was born, but we were unhappy. We were really unhappy. So we split up. And
Did you try therapy?
only at the very end when it was too late. So I don't know why. I mean, now I'm a therapist, but I wasn't then. So it's like, I don't know why we didn't think about that, except I think I believed it was hopeless. Like I didn't, here's what I remember now that I'm talking about it. I remember thinking I was really failing. My parents were so happily married. How this was just supposed to work, so what, it just seemed like fatally flawed. I didn't understand somehow. It seems crazy to say this out loud. I didn't understand there's something you could do about this. It's just like, it works or it doesn't. I never saw my parents have to work at it.
Yeah,
So I
I think
just
that,
thought
yeah, yeah, my parents were like the soulmates that, and it's really hard when you have, and some people think, oh, when your parents fight all the time, I don't want that, but you want that if your parents are super happy, and it's hard to find it.
yeah, or not even fight, but at least, see them have to work and resolve conflict. And like, I know my parents had some, but not, anyway, I was not equipped. So growing up in a very happy home with happy parents was not enough to make me successful in a relationship. And actually all four of us children have been divorced. So it's like, okay, that modeling was not enough. So once I got divorced.
What's interesting is, I think too, I stayed so long because divorce to me was a big failure. And I was not gonna, I didn't, nobody was divorced in my family. I couldn't ever feel like that was a right thing to do. It was like,
Yeah,
stay for the kids. And
yeah, for me, it wasn't so much the idea that divorce was failure, but I had 3 young children, right? I just had a third baby. My oldest is 7. It's like, I just didn't, what am I going to do? I worked this whole time. I've been a stay-at-home mom. I've been homeschooling my kids. Like what, I just felt like there were no options that way, I guess.
yeah, scary.
Yeah. And so when I got divorced, my youngest was 5, my oldest was 12. I stopped working a long time ago. It's like, what in the world am I going to do to support, my kids? So that's where.
Before you had kids, what was your job?
I've done a number of things. I've been in sales. Then I got into computer programming, sort of, which I really enjoyed. But nothing was like quite a career, and anything I had done was totally obsolete. So I didn't have something to go back, like I got a degree in hotel management. I'd never really done that. There wasn't something I could just pick up again after all those years, over 13 years not working.
Must have been scary.
It was really scary. It was really scary. And I remember, at the time, I actually thought, well, I'll open a kid's hair salon. I can learn how to cut hair. That doesn't exist on this little island that I lived on. And the lawyer I was consulting with around the divorce was like, I don't think you realize how long you're going to have to work, like financially, and you're going to be on your feet. And she said, you're following your heart getting this divorce. So follow your heart with what you want to do. Because I had ruled out the idea of doing therapy because it was 2 years to get a master's, and it just seemed insurmountable. But that was one of those, I don't know, do you believe you get these messages like you hear exactly what you need to hear at the moment? That was what I needed to hear. It's like, okay, I'll do it.
And I love that you had a divorce lawyer that was telling you to follow your heart.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that lawyers would be more analytical and
no, she was like, you're following your heart, do it now too. Because she said, is there anything else you wanted to do? And I was like, well, I thought about being a therapist. It's going to be so long and money and, gotta go back to school. And that's just like, follow your heart. So I did.
What was your undergraduate degree in?
Hotel administration, nothing to do with, with being a therapist. The thing was, over the years, people have told me that I'm super easy to talk to. People would just start to talk to me, that I had boundaries, that I was very balanced, non-judgmental, and so it's not like I'd always thought, oh, I always want to be a therapist. It wasn't that, but the feedback I got from people about my skill sets sort of pointed that way.
And then anyway, you start to feel it like it was like home when you started to do the work?
I mean, yes, in certain ways it really is. And maybe the more important thing is, once I went back to school, I in my master's program to get my degree as a therapist, that's where I really learned what it takes to be in a relationship. Like, it was so about the person of the therapist in my program. It was very experiential. It caused a lot of growth and reflection. It was like, oh man. And so I started seeing my now partner in the beginning of that program. And so I was able to put all this stuff into practice and do this. And so I'm in a very successful relationship and feel like I have the skills, but boy, I did not with my first husband. So it's been incredible.
Did you have to pick a specialty? What made you go into sex specifically?
What happened was, early in that master's program, no, you don't have to pick a specialty, but early on, a sex therapist came in and was teaching a course. And what she said in the moment was, I consider most of my work to be grief and loss work. And that just hit me in the gut. That's another one of those moments, like, people are suffering. I know what it is to suffer when your sexual relationship is not working. And I don't know, it's another one of those moments where it's like, that's what I want to do. So from very early in my grad program, I came in knowing I wanted to work on couples, probably out of my old, I see my parents, they knew how to do it, but somehow I didn't. But then I knew then I wanted to be a sex therapist. But then, then it's quite a process because I had to finish my master's. I had to go do in an internship, get hired in an agency. I had to work for a full year before I could go do the training to be a sex therapist. And then that's really a commitment. There's a lot of training, a lot of client hours, a lot of supervision, and a whole, that took, I don't know, 2.5, 3 years to become certified.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's talk age, because I love my listeners so they can see themselves in my guests. So you were 45 when you got
I think
divorced?
I was 45 when I got divorced. Yeah.
Okay. And then you got remarried at what age?
Well, I'm not technically remarried yet, but we're totally like married.
Oh,
But
okay.
I met him in 2008.
Okay.
And
All
we have
right.
been together since, so 12
Okay.
almost.
So
Yeah.
you were over 50 at the time when you met?
No, we met when I was 2008. I would have been, wait, I can't do that math. Would I have been 50? No, 12 years. 50, I'm 57 now. Must have been 47,
Okay.
48.
So you're in your late 40s. Yeah.
Yeah, late 40s. Right. The
And-
math is like, wait.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. That's awesome. And is he the same age?
No, he's older. He's 9
Oh,
years older than I am.
okay. And how'd you meet? People like to know that.
Met online on actually Plenty of Fish, one of the free ones. And I tease him all the time because he looked at my profile and kept moving. And then I reached out to him, and of course we're just such a great match. And I tease him all the time. And if it weren't for me, he was willing to like walk right by the best thing that happened to him. So
That's great. I'd say if my husband that I'm married to now, if he wasn't available, I Googled him and looked him up because of course he was from my past. But if he wasn't available, I would have willingly gone online to date. I was perfectly open to that. You ended up with this new partner applying your new skills. So
yes.
I want to know, what is a common problem that people have when they are over 50? Because first of all, I'll be open about my experience. So I had terrible hot flashes, like debilitating hot flashes, to the point where I couldn't sleep at night.
Mm-hmm.
And this is when I had my corporate job, and I was waking up like 3 or 4 times in the middle of the night. So I was exhausted. So I went, and I have a really great gynecologist, and she recommended I get on a patch, an estrogen patch. I have no history of breast cancer, and actually in my family as well, which is great. So, and I got a really low dose. We even tested it, so it was like 0.05. So it was just this little patch I put on my abdomen, and it was a godsend. I mean, I had no problems, and it cleared up my hot flashes, and I was probably on it for about 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
So then I go off it, and I was always like kind of worried, like, I don't want to stay on this. If I can be off of it, hot flashes are gone. So
Yeah.
I feel great in that respect. But my vagina is like the Sahara Desert, and now everybody on the internet knows that. But what, and I talked to my gynecologist about this, and she's given me creams and things. I'm in this place in my life where I'm anti-pharmacy and drugs. And so I really don't want any drugs squirted up me or ingested or anything.
Yeah.
And so one of the things is coconut oil, like using coconut oil. And that's kind of and she said that's okay. What do you recommend for the?
Well, I mean, basically for the effects of menopause, if you're having, not all women have the exact same effects, but it is common to reduce lubrication and the tissues get more fragile. So there's basically 3 things. There's moisturize, lubricate, and stretch. So to use a daily moisturizer like Replens or something like that. Lubricate when you're going to be sexually active, so use lube. And then stretching, you insert fingers, toys, penis, whatever it is, keep the tissues supple and moving. Whether
Wow.
even if you're not in a relationship, keep doing this so you retain use of your vagina, because it is
Like
a little bit of
yoga, like yoga for the
well,
vagina.
it's just about continuing to insert things so the tissues remain supple. And so these three things to keep it up, because it is use it or lose it. And men have a similar thing with their penis. Like keep getting erections, right? Keep using, make sure the tissue expands and contracts, and keep it as supple as you can. Sort of all.
So what was the three things you said? What was the first thing?
Moisturize.
And what is that?
They just sell moisturizers. Replens is one product that people can use. You just buy it over the counter.
Internal moisturizer.
Yeah.
This is going to be valuable. I mean, I'm
right.
like, I'm going to go to this drugstore. Yeah.
Right. So moisturize daily, stretch regularly, a few times a week or something. It's just, it's something into your vagina.
Yeah.
And then lubricate when you're sexually, use lube with that insertion, whether it's with a partner in sexual activity or it's whether you're using a toy or whatever. Go ahead and use lube.
Yeah. That's interesting. And you can always make a game out of it, right? You don't have to stretch it by yourself, right?
Right. No, exactly. It's like if you're sexually active, that can be part of, that counts as part of the stretching, right? As long as there's insertion. But you want to keep those tissues moving and supple and as moist as you can.
So you need to market yourself as a health and fitness vagina coach. That would be a very unique, different. Right. All right. So what is a common problem with men that at our age?
Right. So the same thing happens, right? The hormonal shifts are happening. And so men start to have generally more trouble either getting an erection or maintaining an erection. Right, it's the same physiological function that creates lubrication in women or erection in men. That arousal functionality can change. And, I think that all of us, men or women or anything else in between, can feel broken or inadequate when this stops working. It can really shut us down and just stop us from being sexual with a partner. We can feel like a failure. We're no longer woman enough or man enough or whatever. And so men, sometimes when they're struggling with erections, that would be a reason they would start to avoid sex. Either way, when couples are struggling with any of this kind of thing, if they don't take this as an opportunity to sort of reinvent what they're doing sexually and adjusting their expectations and creating an environment where they can't fail, instead they feel like they are failing. And so this is a really common reason that people would start to avoid sex.
Yeah, what would you say too? Because I think sometimes it's just hard to start the conversation. So how would you suggest somebody start a conversation where they feel we're not being intimate? I think sometimes people think, oh, we should be having sex twice a week because that's what everybody says. So I think there's also this pressure of feeling like we're not normal. And I think normal is whatever you feel comfortable with, right?
Right. So a couple of things. So first of all, there's no amount of sex that anyone needs to be having. So if two people are happily not having sex, there is not a problem. It's only a problem if not both happy with the situation. And do you mind if I mention, I have a freebie about this, about how to talk to your partner? Okay. So people can go to intimacywithease.com/guide. And I've written a whole guide about how to talk to your partner about your sexual concerns.
Perfect.
But what I would say is the main thing is to do a lot of preparation before you bring it up. Really trying to understand how you see the situation, how you are contributing to the situation, what's your role in it, what do you think is going on for your partner, with a lot of curiosity and compassion instead of just, anger, blaming them. Like to really have thought this out and then approach your partner in a really, really positive way. Like, I want our relationship to be as strong as possible. Can we fix this together? Because my goal in working with couples, whether it's in my practice or through my program, is not to get people to have more sex, but to help them want as much sex as they can want. So this is not about anybody feeling bad or being forced to do things they don't want to do or having to feel like a chore or an obligation. It's about trying to free up desire and create something that you want to be doing. Create a sex life that can really be easy and fun for both people.
Yeah, and that's interesting. You should say that. I love that approach, because a lot of times this stuff comes up like when we're triggered as a result of an argument or something.
Right.
Definitely something that won't be handled well if Yeah.
Yeah, and the tendency, it's not universal, but the tendency is to pathologize each other. You're not, what's wrong with you that you don't want sex? You're not giving me this thing that I'm entitled to or want, or you're the one that all you think about is sex. Why isn't anything else important to you? Maybe you're a sex addict. Like that kind of thinking around something's wrong with the other person's level of desire or the way the other person is showing up. That's just going to keep you guys, it's going to make people defensive and keep you on like different sides of the table. And it's like, no, let's look at this as teammates and allies. And what we want is a win-win, a sex life that you both can enjoy. So
Yeah. What do you think about the love languages? Because it's kind of funny. My husband and I come from different places in terms of needs. He is very touchy-feely, cuddly kind of guy. I'm like, words. Tell
yeah,
me. Tell me I'm beautiful. Tell me I'm wonderful. Tell me. But sometimes I'm like, it's like, I don't know. I'm just not as the touchy type as,
yeah.
and so I guess that's innate within me.
Well, I mean, yes, I think we have innate. I mean, I think I buy that person's premise on the love languages. I think it has value. The point is you have to learn to speak your partners, right? You have to do things that are impactful for them. And the other way I think about this is the way it shows up often is one partner really needs to feel emotionally connected before they want sex. The other partner legitimately finds emotional connection through sex. Holy cow, what do you do? This is chicken and egg. Which one comes first? Like we seem to have opposite needs. So what I tell couples all the time is you actually have to work on both of those things at the same time. It can't be that one comes first and then you get the other, because that's one person winning or getting what they need first. And it's like, no, both of these are important. So you need to be working on emotional connection and talking and things like that. And you have to be working on physical intimacy all at the same time. So both people are getting their entry point.
Yeah, it reminds me of, I used to watch Dr. Phil a long time ago, but I remember one thing he said a couple things that impressed upon me and still stick with me. But one of the things he said was, it's not a 50-50, it's 100-100,
Right.
and that's
Right.
sounds like exactly what you're
Yeah.
saying.
If you sort of unilaterally do the things that matter to your partner, I mean, not at a cost to yourself, right? We have boundaries. There are hard no's on things. You got to take care of yourself. But if you're constantly trying to invest in the things that have the biggest impact on your partner, that is going to create a virtuous cycle all at the same time. So both people are getting their entry point.
Yeah, it reminds me of, I used to watch Dr. Phil a long time ago, but I remember one thing he said a couple things that impressed upon me and still stick with me. But one of the things he said was, it's not a 50-50, it's 100-100,
Right.
and that's
Right.
sounds like exactly what you're
Yeah.
saying.
If you sort of unilaterally do the things that matter to your partner, I mean, not at a cost to yourself, right? We have boundaries. There are hard no's on things. You got to take care of yourself. But if you're constantly trying to invest in the things that have the biggest impact on your partner, that is going to create a virtuous cycle instead of a vicious one, right? And it is unilateral. So don't wait for your partner to do it. Just dive in and start, and you can change this.
Yeah. So you've been doing this now for how long?
A little over 10 years, I guess, at this point. Yeah.
And so you're going virtual more now, or how long have you been on the interwebs?
On the interwebs, I guess what happened, I wrote the book, when was that? 3 years ago, I think, called Sex Without Stress. And so that came out of all of my therapy work with all these couples. The same messages, the same patterns, the same process that I have for people really kind of emerged. And then I started, because it's very difficult to take a book and work through it, right? It's like, well, let me turn this into an online course so that I'm delivering the content, it's structured, and there's homework, and there's access to me through open office hours to get question, support, and not just hit some roadblock and think, oh, we're derailed. And I started doing that, I don't know, 2.5 years ago, maybe. And so I was delivering it live over the web, right? And then recordings. And just this January, I've got it up pre-recorded on a course platform finally. And now it's available evergreen, as opposed to, oh, you got to wait for it to start. Now people can start anytime when it's right for them. So just this year, I'm really making that push, because I see maybe 20, 25 hours a week of clients, whether it was in my office or in my guest room here. And that's all I can do, right? And they have to be in Washington. They basically need to be around Seattle. It's like, oh, this is, how do I, way more people need this. So
Yeah.
it's
And
a
let
way
me,
of trying to
and
impact.
in case my listeners don't know what evergreen means, it means that you can get her course at any time. And I
Right,
love that because a lot of courses are cyclical and they
right.
have open enrollment for a short period of time. And yours just, it has to be available all the time because it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, I remember I was watching some coaching with somebody who had a baby, who babies need sleep, and the baby, like, and she was going to do the cyclical thing, and the person coached her and said, no, 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 when a mom doesn't get sleep because the baby's waking up,
They
they
need
need
this
right
now.
away, you know. And that's
Right,
the
right.
same thing. Yeah, like,
It
I
is
love
the same
that.
thing.
Yeah.
It is the same thing. When you do the launch model, the cyclical, the cart opens, the cart closes, it does create more urgency. It probably makes more sales, but it just doesn't fit for who I'm trying to help, right? Couples, when the time comes up, they need the help then. And right now may not be the best time. Maybe it's 2 months from now. Like, I just don't want to dictate that timing. So yeah, I've made the choice to just sort of have it available all the time.
Yeah. Do you do anything with groups of couples? Because I would think sometimes that might be your I would think your model would be more like, I just want it to be my husband and myself. I don't
Yeah,
want anything else.
I wanted so much to do group stuff, and I had a Facebook. I just don't get engagement. I mean, as much as I would love people to be talking about this so that it's not nobody feels alone anymore, they don't want to.
Yeah.
I may someday have retreats or something, but right now the way the course is structured is it's totally anonymous. So you sign up, you do the course yourself. The online office hours are held via webinar, so nobody knows who else is on the call, and you ask questions through the Q&A, which is anonymous.
Yeah.
So I've done this so that nobody needs to know you're in it. You don't have to talk to anybody else. You don't expose anything. If you participate in the community function, that's not anonymous, but that's optional. And
Yeah.
mostly people are not wanting to do that. And so I understand, as much as I wish people would freely talk about their struggles, because then you'd realize how common they are.
Yeah.
I get why people don't do that. So
Yeah. When you said your retreat, I just have to tell you what comes to mind. Did you ever see the movie Fried Green Tomatoes?
oh gosh, years and years ago. I don't remember that part of
Kathy
it.
Bates, wasn't it Kathy Bates? And she had the women over and they looked at their vaginas in
Oh
the
yeah,
mirror.
like a Betty Dodson kind
Yeah.
of like, yeah, let's all look at our
Oh my
vulvas in
God.
the mirror. It's like,
That's
yeah,
something you could do at a retreat. Let's
right.
exercise,
No,
guys.
even
Look at
even if I do a retreat someday, I think it'll be largely didactic, and then go off and have experiences and come back, and hopefully people would share a little bit more. But so far, I'm not doing anything that requires anyone to expose
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
they're having issues or who they are. So
That's great. That's
yeah.
great. So how can people find you? And what do you have, like, before I ask that question, what would you say to somebody out there who's listening and thinking to themselves, I wish I had more intimacy with my partner?
Yeah. Well, what I would say is, as long as your relationship is good enough, there's goodwill, there's respect, there's friendship, right? Like, parts of this are working well. You're not at a point, Gottman calls it the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. You're not at a point where there's contempt and stonewalling, right? As long as your relationship is good enough, you can absolutely create a sex life that works for both of you. I totally believe that. You can create this in a way that there is no failure, that this is engaging. There's a way to customize it or be creative. So I totally think that that's possible.
Great.
Yeah.
Awesome. And so they can go to your website. I highly recommend that people get your guide. That sounds really useful. I think I'll go and get it as myself.
Yeah. I mean, if you don't mind, I have a few free resources that I would love to highlight. So first, I host a podcast as well called Better
And I
Sex.
will, before we start, all of this information will be in the show notes. So if people
Okay.
are on the podcast, just like scroll up, I think is where you get the stuff. But yeah, you have a podcast. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I have the podcast where I interview all kinds of people on a huge range of topics, which I find very interesting. I've
What's the
got
name
that guide. It's called
again?
Better Sex.
Better Sex.
Better Sex. It's on iTunes and everywhere else. I've got that guide, and then I've got a free webinar that you can watch at any time called How to Make Sex Easy Without It Feeling Like an Obligation. So that would be another just free thing to go watch. I talked about the three most common things that most people are doing that are actually making it worse.
Great.
And then
That's on your
outline.
website, right?
Yeah. So
And
all through
your website again?
intimacywithease.com.
So great. Thank you. This has been a wonderful conversation.
Thanks for having me.
Now the world knows about my dry vagina, but that's okay. I'm not the only one, right?
You are not the only one. It's a common.
And now I have solutions for it.
Right.
I will be exercising my vagina. All right. Thank you so much, Jessa. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for tuning into the Not Your Average Lives podcast. If you haven't yet, make sure to subscribe on iTunes if you have an Apple device. You can find free resources and learn what else I have going on at the moment that might interest you on my website at notyouraverage.grandma.com. You can also find me on Instagram or Facebook at Not Your Average Grandma. If you liked this episode, it would make my heart so happy if you could leave me a 5-star rating. You can also add a review to let me know what you like about this podcast, which will help spread the word about it to others who need a little midlife inspiration. As always, be you, listen to your inner voice, and focus on reigniting that lost spark so you can start living your own, not your average life.